Amen. All right. How many of you have ever in your life made a mistake? Everybody should be raising your hand, every single one of us. Now, some mistakes that we make in life are really small. Some mistakes that we make in life are really big. There are going to be mistakes that you do, and they're like, oh, okay, it's done. And then there's going to be mistakes that you make that are going to impact your life. It's going to impact you for a lifetime. And we're going to talk about Moses tonight and a little bit about a mistake that he made that impacted his whole life. But before we do that, I want to talk to you about 13 mistakes that we all make as teenagers. It says 13, but we're going to do, I think I only picked out 10 because we would be here for a while if we did 13. But coming from someone who was a teenager not too long ago, and some other people that were teenagers not too long ago, we can tell you that these are top 10 mistakes that we make. All right, number one is dressing badly. There was a point in time where we thought a certain style was a good style, and we had the 90s party last week, and some things I wore in the 90s, I probably will never wear ever again. At least I hope not. But we know as a teen, sometimes you're going to dress badly. There are time periods where you'd rather forget how you dressed. I saw pictures of what my mom and dad wore, and I was like, oh my goodness. Like, how could you ever wear that in a million years? So certain mistakes you're going to make as a teenager is what you wear. Now, ladies, number two is maybe wearing a little bit too much makeup. I don't know if you know people that wear too much makeup, or they don't wear it well, or they have too much eyeliner, or like crazy lipstick, or like the big bright blue eyeshadow, like Mimi off of the Drew Carey Show, which I just know that none of you know what I'm talking about. None of you have idea what I'm talking about. But can I say this? Until we get the clown situation under control, girls, be careful how much makeup you are wearing, all right? We just want to make sure we get it all under control and everything like that. Next one is for a guy. If you tend to wear a little too much cologne, I don't know, have you ever been around someone who's worn too much cologne, like you smell them? But can we just, well, this is what happens. Guys, Axe is not a substitute for soap, okay? We talk about this at camp all the time. Anytime we're at camp, we're like, listen, I'm not going to use soap. I'm like, did you shower? No. Jeremiah's been in my room before. I ask everyone, your shoes are outside. Did you shower? Well, I sprayed some Axe. No. Go put soap on your body, all right? It smells bad. Like, middle school boy is not an aroma anyone wants to smell. It's not something. So that's the third thing. Now, I think one thing that we all know as a teenager that we really cared about, that really is a mistake that we shouldn't cared about, is being popular. Like, listen, the people that I wanted to impress, the people that I wanted to like me, the people that I wanted to think that I was popular in high school, you know how many of them I talked to? None. Zero. None. You know how many of them care about what I'm doing? None. None of them. It was one of these things in school. You're like, man, I have to be popular. I have to be accepted. Everyone should like me. Well, guess what? And years from now, you're not even going to probably be friends with the same people that you're like, they're my best friend. I'll do anything for them. Like, you'll get to an age, you'll be like, I don't even remember what their name was. Like, that person, what's their name? So realizing caring too much about popularity is a mistake we all make, as we've all made in life. Number 5 is a good one. Not listening to your parents. Linda, listen. How many of you seen the Linda video? Linda, listen. If you have, I know Linda's not even here. I'm so bummed. I was like, she'll love this. But so many of us, we don't listen to our parents because we're like, oh, okay, they're weird, they're old, they don't really understand me, they don't get what's going on in my life. There's a lot of things, and you know when your mom and dad want to have that serious conversation with you, it's like, they're like, everything changes. They're like, we need to talk. And you're like, no, we don't. We're not going to talk. And then let's go to the next one, because a mistake that we made as teenagers is constantly fighting or shouting at your parents, thinking that was going to help solve the problem. And I remember fighting with my mom. It was funny because I was just texting my mom right before youth group started, and we were talking. But it's like we'd always be like, let me live my life. I want to live my life. and my mom would be like, I gave you that life, so you better chill out. Like, I'm the one that gave you life, so realize that. Realize what's really going on. But we make this mistake of not listening, but then like shouting at our parents. Number 7 is this, and it's going to address some of you. I hope this doesn't make you upset. But one of the other mistakes we make, thinking that school is not important. Like, oh, you know what? No, I don't need to go to school. We're busy trying to figure out what's going on. We're like, I'm going to skip school today because nothing ever happens. Do you ever realize the day you skip school, like everything happens? The day you skip school, something happens, and it's like, oh wow, they did this or they did that. I think I have a picture of that. Like the day you skip. There's a meme that I found. The day you skip school. No, that's not it. There should be one about the skipping school. Is there one on there? Nope. Okay. All right. Cool. We'll just jump on to the next one. How many of you ever had your parents say to you, if your friends all jumped off a bridge, would you? Yeah, like my parents used to say that to me all the time. I'd be like, I already jumped off the bridge, Mom. And she'd be like, what? Like, I already did it, been there, done that, jumped off the bridge. And thinking that, that was one of these choices your friends made. Number 9 would be this. Thinking that getting a pimple was the end of the world. I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever gotten acne or a pimple, thinking that it was the end of the world. Like, as you get older, you just kind of own the fact. You're like, quit looking at my friend on my face, okay? Like, you just own that fact because people will be like, what is that on your face? You're like, listen, I know you're looking at my pimple right now, so just leave me alone. But in school, you always get the pimple when prom's around the corner or when you got homecoming or graduation. It's like, whoop, and it's like real big and comes out on your forehead. And so we have to understand that, that's just a mistake that we made a big deal about. That's really not a big deal. And then I want to say the last one is wanting to grow up as soon as possible. Don't grow up. It's a trap. Some of you are like, I can't wait to grow up. Yeah, you can't wait to pay your own bills and have to pay taxes and have to pay a mortgage and have to pay insurance and have to pay this and have to pay that. Don't grow up too fast. Enjoy being a teenager, because when you get older, hello, this is from Star Wars. Did anyone get this other than okay, the handful of guys are like, yeah, I know exactly. And Jen, that loves Star Wars. Okay, we're just making sure. But realize when you get older, you don't have anyone to clean your clothes, clean your room, do any of that type of stuff. So we all learn from mistakes. But the one thing I want you to realize is that the reason you have people in your life that love you, that care about you, that are pouring into you, is because they want you to understand that we want to help you. Number 1 is I want you to understand that you can learn from my mistakes, that I made mistakes, and that I want you to be able to learn from that so you don't have to go down that road. I've talked to a lot of you guys one-on-one. I'm like, listen, I did the same thing as a teenager. Don't do this. It's going to lead to something that you don't want. And so we have to understand that we can learn from other people's mistakes as well. That there are other people out there that have messed up, screwed up. Like in school, you've had that one friend that did that one thing, and you're like, man, I'm glad I didn't do that with them because they got caught or they got in trouble. So we learn from our mistakes, but we also learn from the mistakes of others. And part of wisdom that God has given to us is knowing what to do when we make a mistake. You can't live long enough to make them all yourself, so learn from other people the mistakes that they have made and the things that have happened in their life. And we started, about Moses, and we've been talking about Moses the last several weeks, and we're going to get into really what happens with Moses and how he gets out of Egypt and really what goes on. But you have to understand, people will make mistakes. You will make mistakes. I will make mistakes. But what separates people from leaders are leaders will always learn from their mistakes. What separates regular people from leaders are leaders will learn from their mistakes. Like as a kid, if I were to go up and I would touch a stove that was hot, I would have the common sense to know, don't go touch that stove again. Why? Because it's hot, it's going to hurt me. I learned from that. I learned not to do that anymore. So we have to learn from our mistakes and what goes on. And we can learn from Moses tonight that Moses learned from a mistake, but this mistake impacted him for all eternity. Check this out. Exodus chapter 2, verse 11 through 12, it says this. Time passed, Moses grew up. Remember, he was still in Egypt. The Egyptians took him in. One day, he went out and he saw his brothers, meaning he saw some of the Hebrew slaves, hard at labor. There was an Egyptian that was beating a Hebrew that was one of his relatives. He looked this way and then that way. When he realized that there was no one in sight, he killed the Egyptian and he buried him in the sand. Then the next day he went out again, and he saw two Hebrew men fighting, and he spoke to them about who started. He says, "Why are you hitting one another?" Then the one man shot back to him and said, "Who do you think that you are? Are you going to kill me the way that you killed an Egyptian?" Then Moses panicked because words had gotten out that people knew that he killed the Egyptian. Plus, Pharaoh heard about it and tried to kill Moses, so Moses left and ran away to Midian. And this is where we pick up the story. Remember, Moses was a little baby. He was found in the river, and they said, "Hey, you know what? We're going to take care of Moses in the palace of Egypt." He ended up being taken care of in Egypt. He grew up as a Hebrew living with the Egyptians. One day he goes out, he sees someone that's like related to him in his Hebrew family getting beat by an Egyptian. So he goes and he tries to defend, he tries to do the right thing, he tries to help him, and he ends up killing the Egyptian, but then he ends up burying him in the sand. Now, one thing Egypt has a lot of is a lot of sand, okay? There's a lot of sand there, so it would be an easy place. But understand, this was a huge mistake. How many of you would ever say it was a mistake to accidentally kill someone? Yeah. All of us, okay? It's a huge mistake that he made to kill this man. Now, we have to understand that he was no longer a young boy. He was a grown man that made a mistake. He wasn't a kid. He wasn't a teenager. He was a man. And he made this mistake. And he grew up in making this mistake. He had to understand that there was consequences for his actions. Because the consequences of his life are also going to be the consequence of the lives of others. Realize this, when you make a mistake, your error in making that mistake is not just going to affect you, but those that are around you. That's what's going to happen. When you mess up or you screw up or you do something you're not supposed to, it's not something that just affects you, but it affects those that surround themselves to you as well. Because that's what happened. I've said it all the time, sin is not an independent influencer. Sin influences everybody. When you mess up, it affects everyone around you that you love and you care about. This is what happened to Moses. He made this mistake. He killed this Egyptian. So we gotta visualize this. What happened? He was standing there watching the Egyptian beat a Hebrew. Then he said, "You know what?" He looked side to side to make sure that no one was there. Why does Moses look side to side? Well, maybe he was looking to see if someone else was going to help the Hebrew out. Maybe he's like, "You know what, man? Maybe there's someone over there or someone over there that can help it, but no one." Maybe he was looking to see, okay, is anyone looking? I'm about to beat up this Egyptian. Or I'm about to kill this Egyptian. I think he was looking for an opportunity to get the Egyptian. I don't think he was looking for help. I say that because what Moses did, he saw no one around. He struck down the Egyptian in a rage of fury and made a drastic decision and made a mistake. How many of you ever made a decision in your emotion and it was a mistake? Like in your anger or in your sadness or in what, like a lot of times don't make an important decision when you're emotional because you're not really thinking clearly. You're not thinking like, that's why con men are so good at what they do, because what they'll do is they'll go in and they'll wait for when you're the most emotional, and then they'll be like, "Hey, you really should do this and do that," and that's when they get your money, and that's when they do this. Why? Because at the height of emotions, we don't think straight. We don't think straight. People said before, "I get so mad, I just see red. I just see red. I get so angry, I just see red." So we have to understand that Moses, he made a mistake out of his emotion that he could have never made. He didn't need to make that, but out of his emotion, out of his rage, out of his anger, he made a drastic decision which would ultimately lead to something that would be happening to him that we'll talk about in a minute. Understand this, that sometimes you're going to make a mistake that you thought was the right thing to do. I want you to understand that sometimes in life, you are going to think that is the right thing to do, but it's going to be a mistake. Because that happens. Where you feel like you're trying to help, you feel like you're trying to do something to aid something, but because of you putting yourself into that place, it messes up and it causes. Because what I believe that Moses, he was really wanting to help his own people. He was really wanting to be there to help those people that he could. But he was still wrong in how he chose to help them. Moses was right to defend the weak and uphold justice, but he did not need to kill anybody. He did not need to make the mistake of taking someone's life because he thought he had the right to. He made a mistake thinking it was the right thing to do. But then we realized that he did finally click, like, oh man, that was the wrong thing to do because he tried to hide the evidence. You ever try to hide the evidence, like when you did something you weren't supposed to? And you're like, okay, I got to hide the evidence. I wasn't supposed to eat those cookies, and there's cookie crumbs everywhere, and you're like, I'm going to clean up all the cookie crumbs. Like, Bethany nails me all the time. I'll just tell you that right now. If I eat something or drink something in the house and I'm supposed to be like eating healthy or not drinking things that are like soda or anything like that, sometimes I'll sneak one in. And I'm like, oh, I got a pastor, and she's in bed, and the next morning she'll like smack me, like, why were you drinking this? And she found it in the trash can. Who goes to the trash can? Bethany does. But she's just like, oh, I was just going to take the trash out, and I saw that you had like a Coke bottle in the thing. And I'm like, that was Timber, wasn't me. But no, made a mistake. Sometimes you're going to make a mistake thinking that it was the right thing to do. But then when you realize it's wrong, sometimes we try to cover our mistakes. I want to tell you something tonight. Our mistakes are not ours to cover. Our mistakes, our mess-ups, our sins, our screw-ups, that's not for us to cover, but for us to ask God to cover. That's to ask God to say, God, I've made this mistake in my life. I need your help. I need you to do something. So let's return to that, what I asked you in the beginning. Have you ever made a big mistake? One that you had to say, like, my bad, I'm sorry, like, I made this big mistake. Now, compared to Moses, you probably didn't kill anybody. I hope you didn't. All right? Maybe your mistake isn't that bad. But understand that when you sin, it's an offense to the character of God. When you sin, when you mess up, when you do something you shouldn't, it's an offense to the character of who God is. Because he's asking you not to do something, and then you're doing it, so you offend him with your action. So it doesn't matter if you killed someone, or if you lied about someone, or if you're gossiping about someone. Ever since the fall of man in the garden, we've always tried to cover up our mistakes. We don't like others knowing what we have done. Like when you have that one friend, you're like, hey, don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody what I did. Like, yeah, dude, I won't tell anybody. Like, oh, did you hear what LeVar did? Oh, my gosh. They're like, dude, I told you not to tell anybody. Because we don't want to be shamed for the mistakes that we have made. We don't want people to know the secret sin or the secret things that we have done. You got to understand this, that there is no forgiveness without confession to God. That there is no forgiveness saying, God, I need you to help me, without confessing the thing that you've done. You know, sometimes we go to God back, God, you got, all right, we're good. Well, no, the Bible says that you need to confess with your mouth the things that you have done so that God can forgive you of the sins that you've committed. Understand that there is no forgiveness of your mistake unless you own up to it. You have to own up to the things that you did and the things that you have done. There is forgiveness with God. Even those that make big mistakes, they can be. Moses didn't have to be overcome with anger and kill. Moses didn't have to be overcome with fear and run. Moses thought he was doing the right thing. Perhaps he hoped his strong action against the Egyptian would be what it would be needed to let all of the Hebrews know, like, hey, I'm the deliverer. I'm the one that God chosen. See, what we got to understand here is Moses thought that he was doing the right thing so that the people he wanted to accept him would accept him. The people that were his family lineage, he's like, I'm going to stand up for the Hebrew nation, and I'm going to be the hero, and so I'm going to take care of this Egyptian so that everybody accepts me. Oftentimes, our biggest mistakes will be at the cost of wanting to be accepted by somebody else. Understand that. Sometimes our biggest mistakes will be at the cost of wanting to be accepted by somebody else. Because we want so bad that acceptance that we're willing to do something. And this is what happened. It says in Acts chapter 7, verse 25 to 26, Moses thought that his own people would realize that God was using him to rescue them, but they did not. The next day, Moses came upon two Israelites who were fighting. He tried to reconcile with them, but they're saying, like, why do you hurt each other? Why are you doing this? But realize that you don't want help from someone who just did the same thing that you did. I don't want someone to come correct my mistake that just made the same mistake. I don't want someone to tell me not to do something that just did the very thing they told me not to do. That's the one thing we don't want. We're like, oh, Pastor Micah said, don't punch people in the face, but he was out in the parking lot beating someone in the face. And then I come to you and be like, dude, you shouldn't fight. Well, you did. Oh, yeah. You're right. See, Moses thought that his own people would realize. He's like, oh, they're going to realize who I am. They're going to realize that I'm the deliverer. They're going to realize that I'm the hero. They're going to realize that I'm the one that God sent to rescue them. So this is how I'm going to start. Understand this, is sometimes when you make a mistake, you will face rejection. Guys, this is what I want you to catch. This is what I caught when I was reading this on Sunday morning. The Israelites did not accept Moses after what he had done, and they rejected him. But now, because of what he had done, the Egyptians would no longer accept him either, and they rejected him. So think about it. The very people he wanted to be accepted by rejected him, and the very people that accepted him before now reject him. Now you have no one. Because the mistakes that you've made, you have no one. The people that you wanted to want you don't want you. The people that always did want you don't want you anymore. Rejection. That's what happened. They did not understand what was going on, and they rejected him. And we've all faced rejection, wanting to be accepted by this person or that person, wanting to be accepted by a group of people that act a certain way or do something. We have this desire for people to accept us. And sometimes we make mistakes, and when we make a mistake, someone's going to reject us. He lost control of his temper. He lost control of her emotions. She messed up this way. She messed up that way. He was rejected by his own people, and he was rejected by the people that took him in. We've all been there. We think we are helping. We think we can take things into our own hands, and as soon as we take them in our hands, we've taken them out of the hands of God. See, Moses this whole story of Moses could have went a completely different way than Israelites wandering in the desert for 40 years. Fightings and death and all the crazy things that we're going to talk about in the book of Exodus. A lot of this could have been avoided if Moses would have done things the right way, the God way. It didn't click with me until yesterday morning when I'm reading this story. I'm thinking, wow, Moses, you could have done this a lot better, and it could have went a different way for you. Maybe the deliverance of the Israelites from Egypt could have went a lot smoother than it did. But he made a mistake. He made a mistake, and then he tried to cover it himself. How easy it is to defend ourselves even when we made a serious error. How easy it is to put the blame on someone else. Well, they're doing this, and so I'm going to do this because everybody else does this. We must admit the thing that we have done. Admit the mistake that we have done. When I make the mistake, I can't say, oh, well, Ryan and Jen and Trevor, they did it too. Well, no, I have to own my mistake. It's my life. It's my action. And my action and my mistake may get me rejected by the very people I was trying to be accepted by. But see, this is what I love about Jesus, is that even when I'm messing up, I'm not rejected by Jesus. Even when I make a big mistake and my bad, I'm not. Jesus is like, all right, I'm cutting you off, Micah, that's it. No more, I'm not in your life, no more love, no more, no more grace. I'm cutting you off, that's it, you're done. No. I mess up, Jesus is like, I'm here for you. Jesus, I screwed up again, I'm here for you. Jesus, I messed up again, I'm here for you. Jesus, I made a mistake, I'm here for you. See, what we have to understand is when we make a mistake, Jesus is still there willing to accept us, not reject us. So really, the only person qualified to handle my mistakes is God, is Jesus. He's the only one that can really handle the things that I have done and the mistakes I've made. He's the only one big enough to handle that. He's the only one that has the wisdom and guidance to be able to handle it the right way. See, the working of delivering Israel had to demonstrate that deliverance is really God's work and not man's. The whole thing about these Israelites coming out of slavery, it was God that was setting them free, not a man. God was going to use the man. He will always use someone who's willing to be used. But ultimately, it was God saying, listen, I'm going to set them free. But Moses took it upon himself to say, I am going to do this. I'm going to put forth this action. That the deliverance of the nation of Israel is on my back, not on God's. See, only God can do the deliverance. Only God can give the freedom. Only God can give the forgiveness. He was pleased to use a man and use Moses, but he did not need any human to help with his freedom of Israel. He can do it all by himself. And the thing about God is qualified to handle all your mess because he has no mess. Jesus is qualified to be in your life and to forgive you and to help you because he doesn't have all the problems you and I have. What I love is that it says Jesus was tempted the same way you and I have been tempted. So he's not unfamiliar, like, oh, I don't know what you're going through. Jesus is like, no, I got you. We could go back in the gospel and read about when Satan tempted Jesus and how he tempted him with all these different things and all of them cover what we are tempted with. So Jesus is like, no, you're being tempted with this? I got you. I've been there. Oh, you're being tempted with that? Oh, I got you. I've been there. Oh, you got that? See, Jesus didn't make the mistakes we made. That qualifies him to be able to handle the mistakes that I've made. Because he's a holy and righteous God. So we have to understand that Jesus is pleased and he loves us and wants to be used by us. It says in Hebrews 11:27, by faith he forsake Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king he endured, as seeing him who was invisible. Although the king sought to execute Moses for killing an Egyptian, that did not frighten Moses nor cause him to flee. He now understood it was yet not God's time. I don't think he ran out of fear of Pharaoh. I think he ran out of fear of God. Saying, man, I messed up. I tried to take my life and your destiny that you proclaimed over my life into my own hands. I tried to do this my own way. God's time to deliver Israel was in his time, but Moses thought it was my time. So God sent him far away to Midian so that 40 years he could be molded and prepared to do it. Understand, it wasn't like, 4 weeks, 4 days. No, for 40 years. There'd be a 40-year time gap between when Moses left and fled to Midian and when he comes back to Egypt. 40 years. That's a long time. That's a long time to focus on a mistake that you've made. That's a long time to reflect and say, God, my bad, I messed up. That this was my fault. I did something that I wasn't supposed to do. We have to understand that we will make mistakes. It's going to happen. I think that God wants to use our mistakes, and he wants to use our failures, and he wants to use all of our issues and problems and all of the things that we are weak at. He wants to use those things to build upon. He wants those to be the foundations of what is going on. Because oftentimes our greatest failures and mistakes that we make in life are built and happen. So I made a mistake, but guess what? Out of those mistakes, my greatest passion is built. My failure is a foundation for my greatest passion. My mistakes, the issues, the things that I have done allow me to build upon what God has for me. What I want to challenge you tonight is with this, is that when you make a mistake, how do you handle that mistake? See, Moses didn't handle it the right way. He tried to hide it. And then in that, he threw into action a different plan that God, a different avenue, a different road that God had to take Israel down than where they could have went. So you made a mistake in your life. You did something you weren't supposed to. You messed up, you flubbed up, whatever it might be. You can go to God and ask for forgiveness, and he's going to forgive you for what you have done. Because God wants to build upon your mistakes and allow you to realize that he can still use you. Even though you feel rejected, hurt, broken, and scared, God can still use you. And God's plan has not stopped just because you've made a mistake. That's what I love about this story. God's not done with Moses yet. God hasn't even started working in Moses. This is just the beginning of what's going to happen. But realize this, the beginning of the great legacy of Moses started with a mistake. Think about that. Moses is probably in the top 3 of the greatest leaders that are ever mentioned in the Bible. Really. He's up there. It'd be Jesus, David, Moses. I mean, he's up there as being one of the greatest leaders and men of God, but his whole thing started with a mistake. So don't think that God can't use you. Don't think that God can't take you from here to there because you've messed up. If God can take a murdering guy named Moses and make him the deliverer of Israel, he can do something amazing with your life if you let him. But are you willing to learn from the mistakes that you have made? Are you willing to learn from the mistakes of others that are around you? Are you willing to, when you do make a mistake, make it right with God and move forward? I made a lot of mistakes that could disqualify me totally from being in ministry. I made a lot of mistakes in my past that even when I was in Bible college, that could have disqualified me from ever being used as a pastor. But God knew the call upon my life way before I even did. And so I want to encourage you tonight, if you've made a mistake, if you've messed up, God still loves you. He still has a purpose for you and a plan for you. But most importantly, God still accepts you. And in that acceptance is forgiveness and grace. Bow your heads.